In this episode, we're going to be learning how to make Gojo'S reversed curse technique. Enjoy. As always, we're going to start out with a fresh version of Blender. For this tutorial, I'm going to be using Blender 4.1, but any later version will work. Right off the bat here, we're going to go to Edit, Preferences, and up where it says Search, type in Node, and enable the Node Wrangler add-on. We're going to be using that for several things. Go down to the hamburger menu, save preferences, and you can go ahead and exit. Alright, let's go ahead and delete the default cube and the light as is proper. I'm going to reset the position of the camera by selecting it, hitting Alt-D and Alt-G, moving it up by hitting G and Z, and then I'm going to Shift-A, add in a circle, go into Edit mode, and select all vertices around it, and hit F to fill, so there's a face in the center, leaving you with a disc. I'm just going to close these areas down because I'm not going to be using them during this tutorial. Go into render preview mode and create a new color. I'm just going to call it Gojo Attack. Even though I believe this is a healing ability. Now, first thing I'm going to do is add in a mix shader. And I'm going to duplicate it by selecting it and hitting Shift-D, and one more time, Shift-D. I'm going to hook up this mix shader into the other mix shader and hook in that mix shader to the top socket of the other mix shader. We're going to delete the principal BSDF and hook in all three of those shaders to the surface of the output. Shift-A, add in an emission shader, and hook it to the bottom socket on that first mixed shader node. Just gonna clean up my nodes a little bit here. Okay. Now I'm gonna go ahead and Shift-A, add a transparent shader, and hook it into the bottom socket of the second node and the first socket of the third shader node. Shift-D that emission shader and hook it into the bottom node on that third mixed shader node. Shift-A, add a color ramp. We're going to hook the color into the color input of the emission shader. Shift-D that color ramp and hook it into the other emission shader. Shift-A, add a noise texture. Plug the factor into the factor of the first color ramp. I'm going to change it from 3D to 4D. I'm going to turn the scale to all the way up to 12.5. I'm going to turn the detail to something along the lines of 4.7. And I'm going to change the roughness to all the way up to 1. We're going to go ahead and change the luminosity, I believe, or I'm sure you guys will correct me in the comments, but I'm going to change it to 3. I'm going to go ahead and select my colors here for the disc. Nice dark red in place of that black slider, and change the white slider to kind of like a red color. I'm sure there's a name for it. I'm just going to go with fuchsia. I'm going to go ahead and pull that one in, and I'm going to pull the dark red in towards it as well to get a higher contrast. And now you can see we have this interesting pattern going on up top. Shift-A, add in a color ramp up top. We're going to go ahead and plug the color into the first mix shader to act as a mask. Shift-A, add in a gradient texture. And this is going to allow us to get soft edges all the way around the perimeter of this disc. Plug the factor into the factor, rearrange these nodes a little bit, and plug the factor from the gradient into another color ramp, and then plug that color ramp into the second mix shader. I'm going to go ahead and select the gradient texture and hit Control T and that adds in my noise or texture coordinate and mapping node, and I'm going to select object to vector instead of generated. I'm going to change that gradient texture to a quadratic sphere, which allows me to have this nice black and white value up top. If you're wondering how I got that black and white value, I hit Control Shift click, left click on the color ramp to preview it, and then I just hook my last shader back into the surface again. I'm done previewing. I'm going to go over to your render properties, and under settings I'm going to change it to alpha blend for the blend mode and none for the shadow mode, and that will be something we do often. I'm going to go ahead and move these colors around just like so, almost basically so they're overlapping on the far left hand side on that second color ramp to get that soft fall off, as you can see up top. If you move these sliders around, you can move where that fall off is if you want some interesting shapes there, but I'm going to go ahead and keep the fall off as it is. Okay, down at this last color ramp here, go ahead and we'll just actually move these over a little bit, make a little bit of room. I'm going to go ahead and pick my colors here for the outer ring, I believe. I'm going to move these in a little bit towards each other to get a little higher contrast on that outer ring. I'm going to add in a noise texture. I'm going to plug the factor into the factor again. And plug the factor of the noise texture into the mix shader in the center for a mask, second to last, or I suppose it is the last. I'm going to change that noise texture from 3D to 4D so we can animate the W value a little bit later. And then I'm going to go ahead and change the emission strength to something pretty high to start, like 721. I'm going to change the second emission strength, or the first one we added in, to 1.8. And I'm going to, sorry about the Epic Games Store message there. Get rid of that. I'm going to move this value up top on the first color ramp pretty much so it's overlapping it, but not quite, 0.003 for the white slider. Second color ramp, I'm going to move the black one all the way back, and the white slider pretty close, 0.018, looks good to me. Okay, back to the noise texture. I'm going to go ahead and change the amount there for the scale to 29.2. My detail to 3. My roughness to 1. And the purlin amount down here to 3.10. Also, now we'll leave the distortion where it is. I'm going to click on my object. I'm going to tab into edit mode. Hold Alt, left click the outer edge. To loop select the outer edge, hit S to scale, Shift Z, lock the Z axis, and just pull it out a bit. I'm going to turn on bloom real quick, just to kind of preview how this is going to look. Put my camera up so I can see it better. A little later on, we are going to turn bloom off here. In fact, I'm just going to turn it off right now. We're actually going to use the compositor to get the look we're going for. So go up to the top drop down, turn compositor to always, go down to your shader nodes and change the layout to compositor layout. Hit use nodes, Shift A, and add in a glare node. We're going to change it to fog glow. We're going to change the threshold to 8.3, and we're going to change the size to 6. I know it's a bit intense right now, but we will lower that down here in a bit. I'm going to Shift A and add in a color correction node. And I'm going to change the midtones to 1.376. These you can mess with if you want a different look, but for the specific look I'm going for in this tutorial, that'll do. I change the layout back to the shading editor, select my disk, and let's go ahead and turn that emission amount down quite a bit. $147. Just don't want it to be too blown out. Go up to add modifier. We're going to go to generate, deform, displace, hit new, go down to the texture tab at the bottom and change the type to clouds. Change the scale of the texture up to somewhere around 0.26. Go back to the modifiers tab, change the strength to 0.5 and the direction to Y. Hit the drop down, duplicate that, displacement, and change the Y direction to X on the second direction. I'm going to change the coordinates of both of them to global. That way it'll move and do what we want without needing an empty. Hit N as in Nancy. With your disk selected, hit item, go to the rotation, and under Z type hashtag frame divided by 300. Click on it, go to the beginning and hit negative to go the other direction and enter. Okay, you can see how it's warping around, but it's a bit too jumpy, a bit too jagged. So I'm going to add in a subdivision surface modifier right at the bottom of the stack. Up the levels to 2 and the render of 2 is perfectly fine. I like where those are at, but I'm going to go ahead and change the color to be a bit darker, more of a red than it was before. I think that looks pretty good. Yeah. All right. So we are essentially done with this first one. That little outer ring of bright white, I'm going to go ahead and enable the compositor here. Since we changed selections up top. Shift A, add a mesh, and add another circle. Drop down bottom left corner and change the vertice amount to 5. I'm going to go ahead and hit G in object mode and just move it below the disk. And this will be used to emit our particles. Go ahead and add in a particle system. Shift A and add in another UV sphere, and we're going to be spawning this sphere. Add a new color on that sphere, scroll all the way down to the emission, make it a nice red color, and let's bump up that strength to about 40. Go ahead and select our pentagon again that we made. Under the render tab in the particle settings, I'm going to change it to object. And with the eyedropper, select the UV sphere we made. Under the number count, I'm going to change it to 10,000. Under the end frame, I'm going to change it to 1,000. And down in the bottom right hand corner of our viewport, I'm going to change the end to 1,000 as well for our timeline. I'm going to change the lifetime of the particles to be around 48.8. Under scale, under the render tab, I'm going to go ahead and turn the scale of those up a smidge to 0.3 and crank scale randomness all the way up to 1. All right, now we're going to move these particles around a little bit. I'm happy with how that looks. But we do want them to be swirling around this disk. So I'm going to go up top to the render properties, go up to the search and type in grav and disable gravity. So they're kind of going upwards like that, the particles. Go back to the particles tab and under, let's see, under velocity, change the normal to about 0 to 0.1. Well, I guess Yeah, 0.16. I'm going to Shift A, add in a force field and a force. Go to the force field properties, and under strength, we're going to type in 20.1. For flow, which is essentially how slow they're moving, kind of like underwater, 1.4. And for the seed, let's just go with 27. Shift A, add in another force field. And we're going to be adding in a vortex force field. Think of this as this is what's going to give it the swirl along with moving the object itself. Change the strength to 2.2 of the vortex, and the inflow to negative 8.9, which kind of pulls them back in towards the epicenter. Change the noise to 10, and the seed something pretty high like 101. Everything else is good except for the fall off. I'd like to change to 1.6 to 1.8. And check max distance and change the max distance to 7.24. This way it won't affect too large of a radius for that fall off, so they can kind of get an interesting effect when they spiral. Shift A, add in another force field, and it will be a turbulence force field. And this will add a little bit more noise to the particles. Change the strength of that turbulence to 5.9. We'll leave the size at 0 and the flow to 10. The noise amount to 5.3, and we can change that seed to 100. Max distance, check that box and type 2.41 meters. Or 2.41, enter rather. Select your pentagon again, go over and emit from vertice under source in the particle properties. Set it from that singular face, so it's shooting out of each vert on that pentagon. Hit N as a Nancy, go down to relations, and under Z, type hashtag frame. And divide it by a fairly high number there. That way we get this nice swirl going. Go ahead and hide that particle that we're emitting. We're going to hide the force, the turbulence, and the vortex, just so we don't see them, so they're not in our way. So you can see how we're getting this nice spirally kind of effect. Looks like something you'd see out of many animes. Naruto, for example, maybe one of their eyes. Shift A, add in a UV sphere. We're going to hit S to scale, Shift Z, and scale it out a bit until it encompasses almost the entirety of the spiral. I'm going to G, Z, and move it up and out of the way. And I'm going to Shift A, add in another circle, and pump those vertices from 5 up to 32. G, Z, and move it up. Go ahead and loop select the verts and hit F to fill. 7 on the numpad. Click this UV sphere and hit H to hide it. And I'm going to make a new color for this. I'm going to call it RIP. For Ripple, I suppose. Shift A, add in a mix shader after nuking that principal BSDF. Shift A, add in a color ramp. Up that mix shader to the surface of the output. Shift A, add in a gradient texture, just as we did last time. Hook the color into the factor of that mix shader. On the gradient texture, click it and hit Ctrl T. Click the object to vector instead of the generated. And slide this black slider to the center-ish, and the white one all the way to where the black one was. And that black one just a little closer to the white. I'm going to Shift D this mix shader and plug the output into the top socket of the original mix shader. Shift A, add in a transparent BSDF and plug it into the top of the second mix shader and the bottom of the first mix shader. Box select these, move them down a little bit for some more space. Shift A, add in a color ramp. Plug the color into the factor of that second mix shader. Pull the black value almost all the way down to something like 0.5. Shift A, add in a Voronoi texture and plug it into the factor of the color ramp. If you're using a newer version of Blender, then you need to use 2 noise textures to get the Voronoi effect. Change the scale to 10, over to your properties of your color, and for the blend mode, change it to alpha blend and the shadow to none. Change your detail of that Voronoi to 0.7, and you can kind of see the pattern showing up already. Go ahead and change that roughness to 0.29. We're going to change it from 3D to 4D. And type hashtag frame divided by 100 under that W factor that has appeared to give it some animation. At this point, I'm going to hit S, Shift Z, and scale it up a bit. Shift A, add in an emission node to give it some color. Hook the color output or the output into the bottom node of the first mix shader. Give it a nice red color and pump up the value to around in the 70s is good. Low 70s. High 60s would work as well if this is too bright for you. Now that gradient we added on makes it softer on the edges and brighter in the center, as you can see. Right where the white is, it's going to be soft to almost invisible to completely invisible, and the black will be mostly visible. So adjust these sliders as you wish. Just like last time, I hit Control Shift left click to preview that, and I'm going to hook this mix shader back into the surface input. I'm going to select my circle, hit 0 on the numpad to look at it from the top from the camera, and S, Shift Z, and kind of play around with the size of it a bit till I'm happy. G, Z, and just move it underneath our particles. Give it sort of an energy effect. And that is the effect almost done. You can play around with these sliders to get the effect you wish, if you want it to be softer or harder as it gets to the outer edge of that circle. I'm going to go ahead and make this sphere visible for the last portion of this. I'll go up to the top, hit solid mode just to show you all that it is the sphere we selected from earlier and we squashed. Okay. I'm going to select that sphere. See, it's just a squished sphere from earlier. We just hit SZ to shrink it down a bit. I want both sides though, so that's why we're not just using a disk. And I go to the modifiers, add modifier, deform, simple deform, leave it on twist, axis Z, and type in quite a high value, something around 700 will work. As you can see, it has twisted it quite a bit. You can see the edges are now invisible when I look at it from the side. Add in another modifier to make this smoother. Generate subdivision surface. We're going to pump the levels up to 4 and the render up 1 to 4 as well. This will just give us a nice smooth surface and less jagged for the color to show up on for the material. We're going to go ahead and add in another modifier, deform, displace. Hit new under the texture, go down to the texture tab, and scroll up and change it to clouds under type. Back to the modifiers tab, change the strength to 2.1 and the coordinates from local to global. Change the size to 2.0. Control A and apply scale to that object so it's not so crazy. And that's just because it doesn't know that we shrunk it. Because we're going to animate the texture itself. I'm going to hit my disk with the ripple we just made with the Voronoi, select all, Control C or right click copy, go back to the blob we just made out of that UV sphere and Control V to paste. I change the blend mode to alpha blend and the shadow to none. We're going to change a few things with this texture though, because we don't want the same texture. We're just going to keep many of the factors. So right off the bat here, we are going to go ahead and select the Voronoi and the color ramp and delete them. Shift A, add in a color ramp fresh, and plug it into the factor of that mix shader. Shift A and add in a wave texture. Connect the color to factor of the color ramp we just added. And Control T on that wave texture for the mapping and texture coordinate. Plug an object to vector. Go back up to this color ramp up top here and move these sliders around to get the contrast we're looking for. Under the gradient texture, change it from quadratic sphere to sphere and delete the mapping and texture coordinate nodes. You can see we're getting this nice spiral looking pattern now. Go down to that texture and change the scale to something around 0.1 to get it kind of a more choppy looking pattern. The detail up to 12. And let's change the phase offset to 21.35. Just because I like where that is. I like how that looks. Under rotation on the mapping, go ahead and type #frame divided by 150 to have it spiral for us. To the color ramp coming out of the wave texture, you can see you can affect how much energy or non-energy is there. You can kind of give it this wispy look. Now you can go under the wave texture and change it to rings if you would like for a different look. I personally like the way rings look. If you liked bands, then keep it on bands. Always experiment to see what you think looks good. You don't have to follow me exactly, but if you want to, go for it. Go ahead and change this top color ramp in a little bit, just to show you that you can get some crazy looking textures out of this. If you want more of an energy field, less of an energy field, could make a great force shield, something like a Star Wars force field, something along those lines. Many possibilities with this texture here. And as always guys, if you didn't want to make this or follow along, you can grab this asset for free on my itch.io page, and the link is in the description. This is the final version that allowed me to make this outro right here. Like and subscribe, but only if you want to.